1 through 3. See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are children's God now. What we will be has not yet been revealed. What we do know is this: when he is revealed, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is. And all who have this hope in him purify themselves, just as he is pure. Thanks be to God for his holy word.
Amen. Thank you. Today's gospel reading comes from the 20th chapter in Luke. Some Sadducees, those who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus and asked him a question. Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first married and died childless. Then the second and the third married her. And so in the same way, all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. Jesus said to them, those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore, because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. All thanks and praise be to God for this, God's holy word, and may God bring us inspiration and wisdom that we may understand more deeply what God is speaking to us. Amen. I haven't preached on that passage very often. It's kind of a strange thing, you know. The the temple priests, the Sadducees, the men of the religious law and authority come to Jesus, and they are giving him a little quiz about church law and theology. And I hate to admit this, but maybe the reason why I don't preach on this very often is because in the course of my career as a Presbyterian minister, I've had to be one of those guys of the law and the authority on occasion. You see, when you're a Presbyterian minister, you not only work in a local church, but my membership is in the presbytery, which is the next highest level in the church. And and as a minister, you have to serve on committees. And there's all kinds of committees in the presbytery. There are mission committees and education committees and those kinds of committees. And then there are committees that have to do with church law and authority. And for whatever reason, throughout my career, they always put me on one of those committees. And I've been in other presbyteries. I am right now serving on that committee in this presbytery. It's called the Committee on Ministry. And our job is to kind of have oversight of ministers and churches and ministers and churches. And sometimes things are happy and fun, but most of the time we're called in to do church authority law kind of stuff. And it's not the most pleasurable thing you do in ministry, but I guess somebody has to do it. So when I read this story about these Sadducees from the temple who come and start quizzing Jesus on matters of church theology and law, I can't help but wonder, if I was back there and on the Committee on Ministry, would I be calling Jesus in front of me and quizzing him about his understanding of the law? Because the fact of the matter is, Jesus broke their church law more than once in the course of his ministry. And if you're a rabbi and you break church law, you got to come before somebody and answer for it, just like a Presbyterian minister would have to do it now in front of our committee. So sometimes I don't like to think about this passage because I think, geez, I could be one of those guys. You know, they could be writing about me in history, how I grilled Jesus on matters of theology and church law, and I sure don't want to be one of those. But it's part of the reality of our living together as human beings that we've got organizations and we got rules and we got leaders and we got to make sure the leaders follow the rules and all that stuff. You know that. And so sometimes I come at this religious authority, law stuff a little differently than you when you read this passage, because you're not in that position for the most part to have to deal with that. But yes, I am in my position, and I sometimes wonder, what would I have done in those circumstances? The passage from Luke 20 is all about how Jesus is being questioned by chief priests and by scribes and by Sadducees, all the official temple guys. And they're asking him questions. They're threatened by him. They don't like his style. They don't like what he's saying. They don't like what he's doing. It doesn't match up with what their tradition has allowed for. And so they are always, every chance they get, they're grilling this guy. They're asking him things like, where does your authority come from? Why do you think you can do this or say this? Why do you think you're able to tell us about whether we should pay taxes to Caesar or not? Who are you to tell us how resurrection works after someone is dead, after a woman has died and she's had more than one husband, and who's her husband in heaven? And how is it that you have the authority to answer a question like that? Who are you to talk about King David and how important he was? And who are you to challenge those of us who have studied for years and years and years to be in the position we are in, and we make judgments on the law and on authority in the temple, and who are you to question what we do? And as I said, I'm not unaccustomed to that kind of stuff. We do that in our presbyteries, in the Presbyterian Church, all the time. You know, when they approached Jesus, it sounded like some kind of ordination examination or something. And I've been through that. It's not fun. You know, first you go before, when you're a student and you want to be ordained a Presbyterian minister, you go before a mighty committee that's going to decide whether or not. And I went before this committee, and I remember it was right in the middle of finals week, and I had been up about 48 hours straight, and I had to go get in front of this committee where they were going to grill me on theology, and I didn't have any of the answers they wanted. And I walked out of the room and I thought, it goes that quick. You blow it in front of the committee and you may not get ordained. They may decide, you know what? We know you've been through 3 years of seminary, but no, we're not going to ordain you. I mean, it's that simple. That can happen. And I went out of the room thinking, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble deep. And one fellow who was on that committee that I considered to be like the Jerusalem Council, said, wait a minute, I know, Jeff, there's something going on here. Let me go out and talk to him. So this guy he'd graduated about 3 years ahead of me in seminary, and we knew each other. And he came out, and he was very caring and pastoral to me, and he asked me, well, what's going on here? What happened in that room? And I just broke down and cried and told him we're in the middle of finals week. I'm stressed. I'm tired. I couldn't think straight, and I just unloaded. And he went back and he told them, and, you know, they all had a pastoral heart. And they said, you know, why don't you have him reschedule and come back a few weeks later after finals is over? So I did, and then I didn't have any trouble. But thank goodness for that one person on the committee and his pastoral heart to come out and meet me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be standing here right now, but I'd be delivering your milk. I really, because that was my job before I became a minister. Today's passage is about church authority and law, but it's also about the reality and the possibility of resurrection. And the fact of the matter is, Jesus is telling church authorities that resurrection breaks all the rules anyway, all the rules that you live by in this world. Resurrection doesn't abide by those rules. In this world, we marry, we are given in marriage, we have children, we get older, just like the pictures we showed the children. We move up in the stages of life, and then we die, and then we're dead. Resurrection breaks the rule, and Christ knew it. Resurrection proclaims that life doesn't end with what we deal with in this world only, that God has a promise beyond what we know. And it requires trust, and it requires faith. See, those who are examining Jesus, they didn't believe in resurrection. The Sadducees did not believe in resurrection. And so they were dealing with life as business as usual. And we know what that mode is like. We know what it is just to kind of get into that worldly mode where we're kind of locked into reading the headlines, and we're locked into everything that's going on in the world. And you know, and I don't know, I'm 61 years old now, and the things I'm reading about in the headlines, it wasn't any different than when I was reading about it when I was in my 20s or my 30s or my 40s. It's the same story that repeats itself over and over and over again. How many times have we bombed the capitals of other nations to achieve nothing? How many times have we done that? I've seen it in my 20s and my 30s, and now I'm seeing it in my 60s, and it'll continue on when I'm in my 80s and when I'm gone. That's the way of the world. It doesn't change. We think we're doing good. We think we're bringing peace. We don't accomplish a darn thing. We're always going back to war. That's the world we live in. And resurrection tells us there's something else, that we don't have to rely on this, that we don't have to depend on it, that we don't have to think it's our total existence to live this way. And that's what Jesus was telling those church authorities that day. Even more to the point, In the first letter of John, and this is way past resurrection, this is the beginning of the New Testament church. In the first letter of John, the proclamation is just very straightforward and simple. Beloved, we are God's children now, right now. This God who has shown us resurrection, this God who promises us life after death, is not a God that we are waiting to see. We are the children of God now. God is with us at this time. God is in our hearts. God is in our relationships. God has never not been with us. We are God's children now. Not someday, but now. And the fact of the matter is, we dwell on so much of the worldly life, and we sometimes forget what it means to embrace that truth, to live that truth, that right now, all of us, you and me, everybody in this room, everybody beyond this room, we are God's children now. And those whom we have known and loved, who have gone before us, who are no longer here, they also are God's children now. And all Jesus was seeking to do with those Sadducees and with all those religious authorities was trying to give them the bigger picture of who they really were, and their laws and all their fancy titles and authority, that doesn't define who we are or what we shall become. We are God's children now. In John's day, in the beginning of the New Testament church, the world was a tormenting place for believers. They couldn't find their trust, their certainty in those things that were around them at the time. They were hiding from a Roman Empire that was becoming increasingly more dangerous in their regard. It was a tormenting place for believers to be. And the promises of fulfillment in jobs, in wealth, in politics, all of that was just heartbreaking stuff for these human beings who chose to follow Jesus Christ. And so we are challenged to understand and seek to know better what it means to live as God's children now, to be children of the resurrection who find our hope in other things beyond that which we worry about most of the time, and to claim that and to realize what's most important. So let me share with you a story of something that hit me just upside the head in the past week that I never expected, that reminds me of what's really, really important. I got a Facebook friend request back in March from a young woman. I knew her name right off. She was a little girl growing up in my church in Minnesota. A 3 years older than my children. And she asked to be my friend on Facebook. And I let it hang for a couple weeks. I didn't know if I wanted to do that or not. I hadn't seen her since she was a little girl, and now she's grown up. So I let it hang for a while, but then one day I went back to it, and I had a few other friend requests, and I accepted those, and hers was there on the bottom of the list. And I said, well, why not? So I accepted her friend request. Within 24 hours, I got a message from her. Thank you for accepting my friend request. And I just wanted to say, thank you for being there when my father died. This is over 20 years ago. I did not remember it at all. And so I went to her Facebook page, because now I'm friends, I can take a look and see if there's any clues there as to what happened. And I couldn't find anything, but I did notice that she just got engaged. And then I talked to my family. And my family knew exactly what happened. Her father had died in a tragic accident. I got called to the ER. I was in the ER, and it was all coming back to me now. Mom was there, kids were there, we were standing in the ER, and the doctor came out, told the family that he had just died of this tragic accident. He was about the same age as me, early 30s. And I was there with the family when that happened, and we walked them through the memorial service of the church and so forth. And suddenly I remembered all this, and I wrote back to her and I said, yes, I remember that was a very difficult and painful time. I see that you're doing well, and by the way, congratulations on your engagement, that you're getting married. And she messaged me back and said, oh, by the way, I'm getting married on August the 3rd. Would you do it? I said, well, I wrote back to her. I said, I'm very honored that you asked, and I need to look at my calendar, August and so forth, look at my calendar and see if it works. And my wife is visiting family in Brazil right now, and I got to wait to talk to her, but I'll get back to you. And then she responded back, well, thank you. I'll look forward to you responding back to me. And by the way, August 3rd was the day my dad died. I'm going, whoa. And I figured out, I looked back and I timed it, and she got engaged, and then she, right after that, asked me to be her Facebook friend. And then I accepted, and then we got into this conversation. She knew it. I didn't know what she was doing, but she knew what she was doing. And, she's taking this negative in her life, the day her dad died, and she's turning it into a positive. I think that's pretty powerful stuff. And then she's now also asked me to be there in St. Paul, Minnesota, when the wedding takes place and perform the wedding. And it's like, this is what the important stuff is. This is what it means to say, we are children of God now. This is the important stuff. You may not remember it, but someone else might and remind you. And this is what it's all about, friends. This is who we are. It's whose we are. And God is talking to us all the time and showing us the right way. Jesus said to those church authorities, your question about whose husband, whose wife this woman is not the important question. The important question is to understand what the promises of God are and live that way. Live like you believe it. Show it in every relationship. Let your hearts rule your life. That's what it is to live as the children of God now. Thanks be to God. Amen. Let us stand.